And once we're dropped into enemy territory as a bushwhacking guerrilla army, we're going to be doing one thing and one thing only: killing Nazis. Welcome back to 31 Days of Halloween. I am here today to talk to you guys about the movie called Green Room. I always want to put the before the Green Room, but it's actually just Green Room. There is no the. And as you can see, I've got a green shirt on and some green lipstick, and that's about all my wardrobe will accommodate green-wise. But so Green Room is a 2015 movie where this punk band is kind of looking for a gig to do, and they find a gig, and then it kind of sucks. So the guy who organized it says, "Hey, look, I have another gig I can send you guys to. Just play like your older, harder stuff." And when the band gets there, they realize that they are playing at a white nationalist Nazi bar. So you already get bad vibes going into it. They walk in and like they're already being harassed by some of the people there, and then you see all the SS and the Nazi and the white nationalist stickers and graffiti and stuff everywhere. And they go out and they're like, let's make a statement with our first song. And this is probably one of the best parts of the movie. But they go out and they basically sing a cover of the Dead Kennedy song, and Nazi punks fuck off. And it just, the energy that they have there, and how the Nazi or the white nationalists or the skinheads are like yelling at them and booing them, and they're throwing stuff at them on stage. And these guys just go on and finish the song, and then they're like, "Yeah, we did that. What's up?" And they go on to do their set. And from that point, everything just kind of goes downhill for the band. Some of the great things about this movie is that there really is no exposition. There's a couple of parts in the movie where the head white nationalist skinhead Darcy, who, by the way, is Patrick Stewart, and I didn't know Patrick Stewart was in this movie. And when I got the copy from the library, I'm walking out of the library and I'm looking through the movies, and I see Patrick Stewart on the front of this movie, and inside I'm literally screaming and going like this, like, "Oh, Patrick Stewart's in this movie! Oh my gosh!" But obviously I'm in the library, so I can't make those kinds of noises, so I'm just like skipping out of the library like this. I'm so excited that I'm going to get to see a movie with Patrick Stewart in it. And even though he didn't say "make it so" in this movie, he plays a really great, imposing character that you don't always get from his other movies, especially like when he's in Star Trek. Like he's very commanding in Star Trek, but in the in X-Men, but he's this like fatherly, like kind, loving, nurturing sort of authoritarian. But in this one, you don't get kind, loving, fatherly, authoritarian Patrick Stewart. He is just authoritarian Nazi Patrick Stewart. And it's great because he talks with such authority, and he's talking about these different skinhead concepts, about red laces and how he's going to get rid of them, and asking for different things. Nobody really explains any of this stuff. You kind of just have to figure it out as the movie goes on, unless you're familiar with that kind of terminology to begin with. And the director of the movie basically said, it's important for the audience to enjoy the movie, but they don't necessarily have to understand every little single thing that's going on. It's more important that the characters in the movie understand what's going on. And I kind of get what he's saying, because if you have to constantly be explaining stuff to the audience, especially in a case like this where there's going to be things you may think you want to explain, the story can get bogged down a little bit in those little details that kind of don't mean much to the story overall anyway. So you can really pick up on like what red laces are after he mentions it, as they're progressing through the film, and it wouldn't have made anything better or easier to understand if Darcy had taken the time to explain to somebody, or Amber when she's locked in the green room with the band, to explain to them what red laces meant. So I like that there was so little exposition because it helped to keep the movie going, and it kept it really tight and tense because there were no real pauses for, oh, and this is what that means. The only times when things really had to be explained, it was fast. And you didn't have to sit there and slog through a couple minutes of exposition. One of the other things that I really liked, and which I didn't realize on my watch through, but I kind of realized it after I had been reading up on the movie, is that there's no real violence without purpose. Anytime violence is enacted on another person, it's because that person stands in someone's way, or they're trying to stop them from doing something. It's, even though the movie is very, very gory, you have dogs ripping people apart and stuff, it's not gratuitous in the way that, like, a Hostel is, or a Saw in the later movies, where people are being tortured and hurt for the simple reason of just making the audience squirm. Here, if someone's there, actually there really is no torture. When someone gets hurt or injured or killed, there's a purpose behind it. They are an obstacle in someone else's path, and that person just needs to enact violence against somebody else to get them out of their path. So I thought that was really neat, and it's probably going to be something that I'm going to look at in other movies moving forward, because sometimes it can be so easy to do violence against people just for that shock factor and to make the audience squirm. But it's a lot more meaningful when the violence has a purpose. So I'm definitely going to be, like, every time I watch a movie now, I'm going to be like, oh, like, what was the purpose behind this violence? Was it gratuitous or was it really necessary? I'm not sure how much research the directors and the writers and everybody did into this movie in regards to, like, skinheads and white nationalists, but it seems like they have a really good grasp of what was going on. And I know the director did say that as part of the punk movement, white nationalism kind of has infiltrated that a lot. And he did explain that, like, the skinhead movement kind of started out as, like, and this is weird, but it started out as kind of like an all-inclusive movement, where people shaved their heads because of immigrants coming into the country, or something like that. I forget exactly what it was. And then he said it kind of morphed. Some of these people left, and they basically twisted what the skinhead term was into, like, associating it with white nationalism. So he seemed to have a pretty good idea of, white nationalism and stuff from that, but they also have, like, the whole red laces thing. And then at one point Darcy asks for true believers, and someone may ask, well, what does a true believer mean? And then it becomes evident after that, but the fact that they know to use, like, these certain terms, or when someone gets handed a knife, they're told, don't worry, it's 1 inch under felony level, so you won't get that much time. And, like, that's stuff that actually gets considered in the real world. Like, that's not something that they made up for this movie specifically. Using kids to do certain things because they'll get lesser penalties, or knowing, like, what you can get away with weapon-wise to, like, not reach a felony level versus a misdemeanor level. And I don't want to get too much into, like, the criminal justice law enforcement part of that, but I just did want to point out that, like, they really are on point with what they were doing, and how they made sure that they stayed kind of true to what would really be happening in real life. So the movie is great overall. It's tense, it's scary. There's moments where I sat there and I was like, everybody's gonna die. Like, nobody's making it out of this alive. I did question at one point, like, why is this a horror movie? But horror is so expansive, and just, there's so many different subgenres, and what is really the definition of a horror movie? So you can't really say, like, a movie should or shouldn't be a horror movie necessarily based on your own opinion, but, like, You know, the movie is tense, and the violence and just the atmosphere in it, I eventually was like, okay, yeah, this should be a horror movie. This should be classified as a horror movie. Maybe like a little bit of an action thriller. But I gave this movie an 8. IMDb gives it a 7, and Rotten Tomatoes critics give it a 90, and I think general viewership gave it something like between a 70 to an 80, I believe. I thought this movie was great. It's definitely one that I would re-watch, and not just because Patrick Stewart's in it. There were a lot of good things about it as far as the storyline, the characters' acting was really great. You get surprised by a lot of things in the story. And it comes together really nicely, and it has like these good messages. And even though the movie is basically about like these kids fighting Nazis and how awful and brutal this skinhead group is, like it doesn't leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. It somehow manages to humanize the skinheads, and I'm not gonna say anything about that. I'm gonna let you see the movie for yourself just to kind of understand what that means, but not in a way that makes you feel bad for them, just like in a way that, you know, you see that these guys are people too. They're not invincible, they're not you know, all-knowing, or they're not going to, like, they can't take over the world, because at the end of the day they're just as fallible as everybody else is. So I'm going to get into some spoilers real quick. So if you haven't seen this movie, I really recommend seeing it. It's a lot of fun. It's really tense. It's scary. It makes you question like whether people are going to be safe or not in it. So definitely go watch it. And I will see you guys who are leaving in the next video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share. And now we're going to have some spoilers. So the only real spoiler that I wanted to talk about is the actual ending, where it's both kind of bleak but also rewarding. So the only two characters who make it out are Pat and Amber. And Pat is the only member of the band. All of his other band members die, even though I really thought the kid who did jujitsu was definitely going to make it. Just because he knew jujitsu and he seemed like a badass and he was kind of taking control of everything, but then he wound up dying. So at the end you get Pat and you get Amber. So the way that they get them out of there is really cool, and it made me think of a story that my dad told me. So Pat tells this story about how him and his friends went to go play paintball with these ex-Marines, and the ex-Marines were wrecking them, and then at the end, and he doesn't get to finish the story, and I'm literally on my couch screaming because I know how this story's going to end, because Pat ends his story with like, oh, we just kind of like went crazy on these guys and we were able to take them all out, and we just, you know, didn't care anymore, and we just went all out and freaked them out basically. And my dad told me a story about one time when him and his brothers went paintballing, and they wound up with this group of like just ultra sort of paintball monsters who go every week, and they have the full autos and they have all the kit and the this and the that, and they were getting wrecked by these guys. And my dad said that in the very last round they decided to basically do the same thing that Pat tells Amber, which is they got up and just ran screaming at these guys. And they were so surprised that my dad and his brothers were actually able to take a bunch of them out before being taken out themselves. So the fact that Pat tells that story, and then that's basically what him and Amber do, where they paint on their faces and just go all out, and they're just like, you know, we may make it, we may not, but we're gonna go out with a bang. That was such a cool ending. So I love that, and I love the Sharpie, and then how they just get out and they take out Darcy and everybody, and then they're just chilling outside of the compound, just kind of waiting for I I guess, the police to arrive or whatever. And Pat's like, oh, hey, do you want to know what my Desert Island Band is? And Amber's like, find someone who gives a shit. And it's just such a perfect ending to this movie that, like, kind of takes the rules and throws them out the window. And it's so very punk, especially in the way that these two kids survive, that I would not have wanted this movie to end any other way. That way was just absolutely perfect. So I really recommend you going to see it, even if you haven't and you sat through the spoilers and you know how it's going to end. Go watch it anyway, because it's such a great movie to watch, and it's so rewatchable. And I didn't talk about everything that happens, so you'll still have some surprises, but definitely go watch it. And before you go watch it, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share my videos, and I will see all of you in the next one.